Win number 200 for Wisconsin coach Greg Gard, the third fastest UW coach to reach that number.
You guys know this isn't not about me. My name goes with it, but I've had terrific players, the current ones, the ones that have been here for the last 9 years, terrific coaches with me. I got a phenomenal staff right now, support system.
Gard is a two-time Big Ten Coach of the Year and has won a couple of conference championships in his first 9 seasons in Madison.
There's just a lot of people that help put me in this position, and it's a lot of people that should go on that 200, probably 200 people.
Gard and the Badgers now 14-3 on the year, 4-2 in Big Ten play. They're going to head west for a pair of games against new members of the conference this weekend. Going to get USC on Saturday and then stick around and play UCLA on Tuesday. As of now, the fires that are impacting the LA area not expected to affect those games. Turning to the Bucks, they will play the second game of a back-to-back tonight against the Raptors. Milwaukee took the first game of their back-to-back against the Kings last night by 15 points. Tip tonight is at 7.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Rural Mutual is the #1 farm insurer in Wisconsin for a good reason. As a company founded by farmers, they understand the ag industry and its challenges. Local agents offer farm families the best advice and personalized coverage. Visit ruralmutual.com to find an agent near you.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Well, the Packers going to have at least one opening on their coaching staff next year. That's after Coach Matt LaFleur said yesterday that quarterbacks coach Tom Clemens was retiring, spent 2 different stints with the organization, only one to coach Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, and Jordan Love. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil, Prid.
This broadcast once again is authorized by the Milwaukee Brewers Baseball Club, intended solely for the entertainment of our listening audience. Any rebroadcast or other use without the express written consent of the Milwaukee Brewers Baseball Club is prohibited.
For all of these years, it's been a great run, but #1 has always been baseball for me. No matter what else I ever did, baseball was the only way I wanted to go.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
My dad actually sent me that little bit of audio, that legal disclaimer. I don't know why. For my dad, and I guess for me by extension growing up, you always like to say that part of the broadcast along out loud when you're listening. Without express written consent of the Milwaukee Brewers Baseball Club is prohibited. And he sent that to me today. I'm like, it's got to go in the intro. I cut so much Bob Uecker sound today. So many highlights, so many, quotes from famous commercials and famous interviews. Try to work them into the show as much as possible. I just watched so many Brewers. I watched so many Brewers highlights today. Not the show that I expected to do. When I texted Bill this morning, about an hour before I left for work, it was about, 7:38. I said, all right, here's what I'm thinking, Bill. Brian Gutekunst's presser today. That's going to be the main thing. We got Jesse Temple. He'll talk Badgers. Maybe we'll get Clemens for 10 minutes, just quick reaction. But the Gutekunst presser, that's going to be, we got to make that the thing for 4 hours. And then in a span of like 20 minutes, because I think the Uecker thing broke and became public around 20 to 10, said, all right, Jesse, sorry, can't do Badgers today. And he was like, yeah, I agree. Instead, we got Chuck Freeman and Tim Allen, 2 Brewers recurring guests that are on with Bill a lot. We got a hold of Bob Costas. Bill got a hold of his Cincinnati friend, Marty Brenneman. Like, we just all of a sudden we're doing baseball today, which is the last thing that I expected when I left for work today. Obviously very sad, but in this weird, twisted way, a sad but also beautiful excuse to talk baseball on a day and in a part of the year where we would otherwise not be able to talk about baseball, which again is sad, but also for someone who absolutely loves baseball, kind of cool in a sad way, in a bittersweet way. This is the Wisco Sports Show. My name is Grant Bills. I'm thinking tonight, take some of your calls to talk Brewers and to talk about Bob Uecker. Maybe it doesn't work out that way. Maybe everyone's just sad They don't want to talk about it, but I've built in some space tonight to take your phone calls, to talk Brewers, and to talk about Bob Uecker, who was the broadcaster for this team for a long time, and famous for a whole lot of other reasons outside of baseball, even if, in that bit of audio that I played in the intro, baseball was his main thing. So I want to take your calls. If you have comments, text them, call them in, 608-321-1670. You can comment on the live stream as well, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We also have 2 football guests tonight. So Sam Bruchhaus, Sumer Sports, is going to be here at 4:30. We'll talk about the Packers and about the playoffs. A lot of people believe that the divisional round is the best weekend of NFL football of the year. I think it's a reasonable case. The best teams are playing, but it's before the field gets narrowed down too much. We still have a good amount of games, right? But there's no excess, right? It's only the best team. So we'll talk about that with Sam, Sumer Sports, who's been an awesome recurring guest this season so far. Excited to have him. And then Mike Clemens going to chime in at the end of the show because he was in Green Bay for Brian Gutekunst's presser earlier today. So we'll connect with Mike because we normally do that on Thursday anyways. The rest of the show, if you would like to, I think I would like to, we can talk about Bob Uecker and the Milwaukee Brewers. And I guess, and I was talking about this with Bill earlier today too, and I talked about this with our friend Bart Winkler and Paul Imig yesterday because I do a podcast with them once a week. I had seen a rumor mentioned in a group chat that maybe something was up with Bob Uecker yesterday. And I couldn't find any information. I mean, I wasn't calling people with the Brewers, but I texted a couple people. I was like, hey, is everything okay with Uecker? Like I heard a rumor. This was yesterday. And I was talking with Bart and I was talking with Paul before we were about to record our weekly podcast, Into the Winklerverse, which you should listen to. I enjoy doing it every week. And we talked about the idea of doing the Bob Uecker show because Bart's on the radio every day. I'm on the radio every day. And he was 90 and he's been old for a while now. Like being 80 is old. Being 75, being 70 is up there, right? So for the last 10 years, let's say conservatively, you would begin and end every Brewers season wondering, I wonder how many of these Bob has left, especially the last couple of years because he's backed off, traveling and backed off doing as many games. And even if he was in perfect health, he's still 90. So even if he's in perfect health, it's like, why isn't he doing games in Pittsburgh? Well, at 90, I don't know that I'd want to go to Pittsburgh, even if I was the healthiest 90-year-old in the history of the world. 90 is 90, right? So for the last couple of years, especially, I have this deep down thought, someone who's on the radio every day, like at some point, probably Bob Uecker is going to pass away and I'm going to have to do the Bob Uecker show, which I didn't really expect to do. And I showed up to work today, but the news broke and all of a sudden we got to do the Bob Uecker show. And I talked about this idea with Bill earlier that, the Brewers have had this legend, this person that we've all known forever. It's going to hurt so bad when this person passes away because this person means so much to everybody. And when they finally pass away, it's going to mean so much and it's going to, cause people to feel so strongly. We're at some point going to have to do a Bob Uecker show. You know what I mean? And I think people like me or certainly Bill, who's been on the radio way longer, we've known for years now, at some point we're going to have to do the Bob Uecker show. And I guess that's today. And I was a part of Bill's show. And certainly there have been sports talk shows in Wisconsin who have already done this today. And I've listened to some other shows and lots of guests and lots of stories. I was around Bob Uecker in person once. I don't really have a story. And even if I had a story, everyone's got a story. Right? People who covered the Brewers, people who worked at the ballpark, people who've been around the team. Everyone's got a story. Everyone has a memory. Everyone has that memory of being little and listening to Bob. Everyone has that memory of, that one time me and my dad or me and my grandpa. Like I could try to come up with a Bob Uecker story and tell it, but that's not really that unique. That's not, everybody's got that. We've all got that, right? Just going through the day today, getting ready for the show. I'm like, well, I don't really have a story. I don't really want to go that route. And over the last hour, getting ready for the show, what I was doing is just cutting all of these highlights and all of these bits of audio and bits of video. Like I was just immersing myself. Once Bill's show was finished and I posted his podcast, really this afternoon, I just ate my lunch. I was sitting here in the studio by myself and I was watching and recording highlights and Bob Uecker moments. And what I realized in doing this about a half hour ago, it occurred to me, the light went on. I said, I know why I love Bob Uecker. I know why everyone loves Bob Uecker. Of course, it's because he's funny. And of course, it's because we have all of these memories. And of course, it's because of Major League and of WWE and the Miller Lite commercial. It's all of it. But the reason Bob Uecker means so much to me and the reason I love Bob Uecker so much is because he is baseball. And I love baseball so much. And baseball, when it's good, is better than anything. It's better than basketball. It's better. You're going to think I'm crazy. It's better than football. And that's not to say that Major League Baseball is a better league than the NFL or more people like baseball or that I would rather have baseball. If I had to pick one, I would take baseball over football. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is when you get a peak baseball moment, there's nothing else like it. Like I was watching all these Bob Uecker highlights through the years. The no-hitter with Juan Nieves or team streak in 1987, right? The Dale Swaim walk-off on Easter Sunday to go to 12-0, right? Or the CC Sabathia moments or the Ryan Braun moments or in recent years, the Christian Yelich moments or heck, I was watching Garrett Mitchell highlight from, I think, 2 seasons ago, and I'm like, my God, he's 89 and he still sounds incredible. And what I realize is, yes, Bob Uecker is incredible. What a voice, what a personality, what a sense of humor. But really why Bob Uecker makes me feel that way and why Bob Uecker has made so many people feel that way for so long is because we all love baseball so much. And there's never been a human being, in my opinion, who's embodied what we love about baseball like Bob Uecker did. And you say, oh, Vin Scully. Oh, sure. Great announcer. Jack Buck, great announcer. Bob Uecker, also a great announcer, but it was bigger than that. It was more than that. It was the stories and the history and just all of it. All of it. The representation of baseball in other media, right? Like he was the champion of the sport of baseball in WWE or on the Johnny Carson show or in commercials or in Mr. Belvedere, certainly in Major League, which is, of course, a baseball movie, right? It occurred to me this afternoon as I'm getting ready for the show. I love Bob Uecker. Yes, we all love Bob Uecker, but really why I get that feeling when I'm listening to his highlights or when I'm just thinking about him now that he's gone at age 90, it's really more of a love of baseball. It's bigger than Bob Uecker. It's a sport that we all follow and that connects us all. And I've lived up and around, I grew up and around Eau Claire, which to a lot of the state is up north. I don't consider it to be up north, but for a large majority of the state, that's okay. That's the northern part of the state. I lived in the La Crosse area, which is completely different topography, different people, different personality, different everything. Lived there for 6 or 7 years. Lived in Madison for a stretch. Now I live pretty close to Milwaukee. I spend a lot of time there. I haven't lived up around the Fox Valley, and I guess I haven't lived in central Wisconsin. But for someone who's 26 years old, I lived in a lot of different spots and experienced a lot of different parts of Wisconsin and known what it is to exist in different parts of the state. It's not just visiting a place, it's living and working in a place. It's the rhythm of the Monday through Friday, the weekends, the 9 to 5, right? It feels different around Eau Claire to wake up in the morning and go to work and to go out on the weekend. It feels different to do that in Eau Claire than it does in La Crosse. And that feels different than it feels in Madison. And it feels different than it feels in Milwaukee. And I don't know about Green Bay, but I'm pretty confident that if you lived in Green Bay and existed there for a while, there's a different rhythm to it, right? The 9 to 5, the Monday through Friday, the Saturday. It just is a different feel. It's a different culture. It's a different personality. And yet, in all of my time, if you go up around Eau Claire, Chippewa Falls, Menominee, or if you go up a little farther north to Rice Lake, or certainly up around Hayward or Spooner, that part of the state, or all the way up to Superior, Brewers baseball is on the radio everywhere, in garages, around campfires, in the car. You go down towards La Crosse. WKTY has carried the Brewers literally since the Brewers came to Milwaukee. And they have been on the radio and broadcasted on people's radio in garages, in cars, in houses, around the fire, right? On boats, forever. Madison, much of the same. Milwaukee, much of the same. You drive around, not even in downtown Milwaukee or close to the stadium, but you go out 25 minutes in around the suburbs, in Lake Country, or even farther out towards Cottage Grove. If you're in Cottage Grove on a Saturday afternoon, there's a 6 o'clock Brewer game. You go to the Quick Trip off the Cottage Grove exit. People are getting ice. People are getting beer. Brewers license plates, Brewers flags, people getting ready to tailgate, people getting ready to go into the game. You drive around the neighborhoods in Lake Country outside of Milwaukee, it's Brewer flags, it's Brewers things in yards, it's license plates, it's bumpers. It's something that connects us all and that is uniform around the state. And honestly, a way I don't even think the Packers are. The Packers are statewide too, but they're statewide in a different way. There's a certain thing about baseball that when baseball is at its best, it's just the balls. It's just the best. And there's days where baseball can be a slog, and there's seasons where it can be kind of a slog. But you watch Bob Uecker highlights and you hear his voice as CeCe Sabathia has some of those unbelievable moments, or some of those crazy Ryan Braun moments, or some of those moments in the 80s, right? I referenced Team Streak, but obviously the World Series team in the early 80s, right? Like the theater of one pitcher versus one hitter with an entire stadium of people all hinging on that one arm throwing that one ball at that one bat. It elicits an emotion, and it elicits a tradition, and it elicits this feeling that you don't get from football. And we've seen the Packers win Super Bowls. We've seen the Bucks win a state championship. We've seen the Bucks win an NBA Finals. We've seen the Badgers, at least basketball, go to a national championship in my lifetime in Final Fours. But when baseball's at its peak, it gives us a different feeling, and it unites everybody who's watching and listening in a way that I don't even think happens with football or basketball or hockey or other sports. And while Bob Uecker is so charismatic and so funny, and we all have so many memories and so many stories, there have been a lot of great announcers who are funny and who can tell stories. There's a million great sports announcers that we have memories with. I remember watching games with my dad, or listening to games with my dad or my grandpa, and that being the voice on the radio, or that being the voice on the TV. And Bob Uecker is certainly one of those. I think what makes him next level, and I think the reason that he elicits such a strong response, is he is like baseball personified. And I think our love for Bob Uecker is as much a love for baseball as it is anything else. And I just think baseball, when it's at its best, elicits emotion from its viewers and fans that other sports just can't reach. And that's not to say that football isn't good or basketball isn't good, but when baseball is good, there's just absolutely nothing like it. If you have thoughts on Bob Uecker or the Brewers, would love to take your call. We're going to have about 10 minutes when we come back before we got a break, and then we'll talk some football with Sam Bruchhaus, divisional round coming up. And I want to get his thoughts on the Packers and what happened at the end of their season as well. Jordan Love, that kind of thing. And whenever we have time, some strong comments from Brian Gutekunst earlier today that I'll work into the show as well. More of the Wisco Sports Show. Your calls, 608-321-1670 next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes.
You know, one of the best things about being an ex-big leaguer is getting freebies to the game. Call the front office, bingo. And once these fans recognize me, I probably won't even have to pay for my light beer from Miller. Down it! I love them. These fans know I drink light because it's less filling and it tastes great. Good seats, huh?
You're in the wrong seat, buddy. Come on.
Oh, I must be in the front row.
Come on.
Light beer from Miller. Everything you always wanted in a beer, and less.
Good seats, hey, buddy? He missed the tag! He missed the tag!
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Here's the pitch. A curveball! Drilled to deep left. Gonna get way out of here and gone for deer. And they have tied it at 4. Whoa. Gantner, there he goes. The pitch. A swing and a fly ball. Right field and deep. Get up and get out of here. Gone for Swaim. And they've done it again. 12 in a row. On a 2-run blast by Swaim to win it. Oh, my goodness. Holy cow. Do you believe it?
I watched so many Bob Uecker highlights, so many Brewers highlights today, and got sad thinking about how Bob Uecker passed away at 90 years old. But what I realized, a little bit of an epiphany this afternoon, it's like, oh, baseball is the balls. That's right. Forgot how this sport, when it's at its best, can give you a feeling that you just can't get from the other sports. And I think Bob Uecker, unbelievable broadcaster, entertainer, comedian, all of that. But the reason so many of us feel so strongly about him is because he's kind of an extension of the game that can make us feel a way that other games can't. And that was kind of my realization. That's kind of my Bob Uecker take. If you have a take or a story, please, we got time. Sam Bruchhaus, Sumer Sports, going to be here in about 10 or 15 minutes. Let's take some calls. First, 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hello?
Hello? Yes.
Hey, Grant, it's LaCroix Butler.
LaCroix Butler. Good evening, LaCroix. How are you?
I'm doing well. Well, not the best day, obviously, with you passing. Of course. Yeah, absolutely. But your opening monologue, I thought was excellent, and I completely agree with you. When baseball's at its peak, you're right. There's nothing better. The NFL's not better. NBA's not better. Baseball's the best.
It's weird because we only have, what do we have? Like 5 moments, maybe in my lifetime, in the last 25 to 30 years, that make you feel that way. Like there's Brewers fans that have gone decades without feeling that.
If that, maybe 3 moments.
Yeah. And then moments like I still, that loss against the Mets, especially looking back at it now. And I think a lot of us thought that, I've thought for every season for the last 5 seasons, I've thought, oh, that could maybe be the last that we have Bob Uecker, because 90 people were like, well, now it makes sense. I mean, he stopped going to Pittsburgh. It's like he was 90. He could be perfectly healthy and I still wouldn't be flying to Pittsburgh.
No, I agree. And I mean, that last Mets game, just the ultimate kick to the huevos. It does not get worse than that, especially what happened today. But I know you got a lot of callers. Just wanted to give you a quick question here.
Yeah.
Brewers Mount Rushmore to me is Bud Selig, Robin Yount, Bob Uecker, and Ryan Braun. And honestly, let's get number 8 retired before it's too late, so we don't have to live like this if he passes away.
Thank you, LaCroix. That's a good call. Also, Ryan Braun authored some just unbelievable moments in the last 15, 20 years. That's what I was realizing watching Brewers highlights today, which I knew because I lived through them all. I love Ryan Braun. I would die for Ryan Braun. But my God, what an author of some of those incredible moments that make you feel, the way that only baseball can make you feel. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant, Tom in Oak Creek. How are you?
I'm great, Tom. How about you?
Well, sad day, obviously, with Bob Uecker. I'm grew up around Milwaukee, diehard Brewers fan my entire life. Found my love for the team back in the 90s when they were terrible. I think the reason Uecker is so special for many of us is we always want the players and coaches on our team to love the team as much as we do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Uecker was one of the only people who ever actually did. Like, you saw him, and it's like his love for Milwaukee and the Brewers and the state matched even us as diehard fans. And I think what really hammers that home is the whole Counsell narrative. You know, they tried to, Counsell as the Milwaukee kid, grew up going to the Brewers, but even he had no loyalty at the end of the day. Whereas Uecker for 50 years was the voice of the Brewers and was any of us celebrating the victories that we had.
So the Counsell comparison is an interesting one. And I agree, Tom, and that's something that I didn't bring up. I appreciate the call, right? The fact that he loved the team. He loved the area. He was Milwaukee. That's something that Bob Costas talked about when he's on with Bill. I'll play some of that audio for you before the end of the show. It's like, you guys don't understand, like, truly how much he loved Milwaukee, considered Milwaukee home. I have Craig Counsell takes relating to this. I'll probably keep them in my back pocket for another day. But I have takes. Those are reserved for the group chat until the body is at least allowed to be laid to rest. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Brad, it's Corey from the car wash. How you doing?
Corey, you sound like you're in a wind tunnel. I was going to say, what's up, Corey?
I am. I'm in the car wash, getting the car wash before the real cold weather comes. So,
good idea.
Apologies if you can barely hear me, but
you're good.
Yeah, I liked your opening monologue and your spot on about baseball being really awesome, like when it's really fun or when it's really going well, because the momentum swings they're almost like lightning shots versus like a rolling thunder. Like in the NFL, you can kind of see it coming, like a momentum change.
Mm-hmm.
But in baseball, and that's why it's like so gutting when Devin Williams grooves a pitch to Pete Alonso in October and loses the game. So yeah, man, it's been a rough day. I'm going to be honest. It feels like winter finally started today. The Packers losing, that was kind of like the beginning of it. And then like today, just put a bow on this week, basically. So not to get too down in the dumps. But spring training's around the corner. And I'll tell you, I'm really happy and fortunate back in the 80s. I got to live and hear some of those calls that you were playing, especially the Easter Sunday one there with Dale Swaim. I remember.
Team Streak.
And I'll let you get going there. Team Streak. I was at my neighbor's house, and her mom was weeding in the garden. She always was listening to the Brewers game, and got to hear it firsthand as a 9-year-old, and it's still seared in my memory. Like that was, and then going down to George Webb with my dad with a cooler to get hamburgers that week. So,
oh my God.
R.I.P. to the man, and made me really think of my dad a lot today, because he and I would listen to the games quite a bit, and. Anyways, I will let you get going.
Corey.
Take it easy.
Yeah, appreciate the call. Take it easy, Corey. It's funny. You remember exactly where you were. You remember what your friend's mom was doing, of course, because that's the power of baseball. I would also claim that that's the power of radio, right? When you have that audio memory put into your brain and you're allowed to gather that memory when you're doing something else, you just remember the everything else. It's power radio. Theater of the mind. But what do I know? I'm just a radio stiff. In a video world in 2025. 608-321-1670. We got time for one or two more, and then we'll take a break. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Grant, this is Dean in Eau Claire. I've texted occasionally, but I have a first call.
Well, I'm happy to have you, Dean.
Yeah, good. And what a segue, because I grew up, the Brewers came to Milwaukee when I was in high school, and I'd listen to the Twins because I grew up like you did in Western Wisconsin. And we could get the Twins games, but there were no Milwaukee teams, so the Brewers came back. And with those awful teams, the first 8 years of the Brewers, you still had to listen to the whole game, because Uecker, as soon as they got out of contention in a game, he'd start telling stories, and that got me entrenched as a Brewers fan and entrenched as a Bob Uecker fan. But it also brought home to me, the importance of radio. We would be milking cows in the summer and listen to those Brewers games on the barn radio. And sometimes we were done with cows, but the game was still going. We'd stay in the barn till the game was over. So, it was just part of it. And as far as the radio magic, it really inspired me to get into that business. I was in broadcasting for 46 years. I retired a few years ago, and Uecker was there before my career started. And Uecker was there after my career ended. And I was so glad to be able to listen to him all these years.
That's an awesome call, Dean. I appreciate it. Thank you for sharing that. I saw tweets today about how I don't know if this is true. Baseball statistician author tweeted this earlier that Bob Uecker called 3.5% of all baseball games ever played or something like that. I'll have to go dig that up. But yeah, he played with Henry Aaron and then called Jackson Churio home runs this year for reference. And I just think the historical span of a career like that's worth considering. Almost that's a secondary thing. That's a whole nother thing. One more call. I'm sorry. And then we got to get to our guest, Sam Bruchhaus. We'll talk a little football. We'll get back to the baseball. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Brett and Tulsa.
Brett and Tulsa. What's going on, man?
Hey, Grant. Yeah, I don't really know what to say. It's kind of one of those things where when someone's 90 years old, I mean, you assume this day is going to come at some point, but until it's here, you don't. It's just hard to put into words, right? I mean, I kind of expected something like this, whether he was going to hang it up or you knew the end was near, whether it was at the end of the season when Yelly had those videos and Levering. But yeah, I mean, his impact to the Brewers and the state and potentially the greatest one of, if not the greatest Wisconsin sports icon of all time. Yeah, I mean, he's a GOAT.
Yeah, I don't think they get any better. Brett, I appreciate it. And I know we were messaging a little bit earlier because I told Brett, I was like, you got to call my show tonight. And he's like, yeah, I don't really know what I'm going to say. It's like, well, I don't really either. We're just going to celebrate baseball and, a lot of memories that we've shared. Let's talk a little football, and then we'll get back into talking about the Brewers and Bob Uecker. A lot of time to do that tonight. But Sam Bruchhaus, Sumer Sports, going to join us, talk a little bit about what he saw at the end with the Packers, and to preview the division around the NFL writ large. He will be here next. It's the Wisco Sports Show.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
Let me buy a beer. Sure. These fans, I love them. When I came in, they didn't recognize me at first, but then when I told them who I was, next thing you know, they're buying me my favorite beer, light beer from Miller. They know us ex-big leaguers drink light because it's got a third less calories than their regular beer. It's less filling, and it tastes great. Thanks. Hey, it's a pleasure to buy a beer for a great pitcher like Whitey Ford. Hey. So I lied.
Light beer from Miller. Everything you always wanted in a beer, and less.
Hey, Whitey, I thought you were a lefty. Oh, that's right.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Test. It's the Wisco Sports Show. Welcome back. We'll talk more baseball. More Bob Uecker. Rest in peace. Get back to taking your calls. Mike Clemens also going to join us at 5:30. He was up in Green Bay for Brian Gutekunst's presser earlier today. Nothing totally earth-shattering from that presser, but still always worthwhile to talk about anytime a general manager talks, just because for most teams, and the Packers aren't an exception, it just doesn't happen that often. It's pretty infrequent that the general manager takes questions from the media. Joining us now, a recurring guest throughout the season. Thrilled to have him, Sam Bruchhaus, Sumer Sports. Sam, have you ever seen or explain to me how a team loses to the Vikings twice, the Lions twice, and the Eagles twice? That has to be statistically not very common throughout the years.
It's certainly not common, but the explanation's pretty easy. Those teams are really freaking good.
Yeah,
this is a really top-heavy year in the NFC. Obviously, it didn't go the way that the Vikings wanted to go, but they just have a bunch of good players. And the Packers are in a standpoint where they're a very young team, and some of those guys just aren't elite yet. And when you run into buzzsaws like that, sometimes it's a little hard, and it really shows you who you are. And I think that's what ended up happening this past weekend.
Their offense just never – they didn't even start slow. Well, they did start slow, but they just never really started, right? Even the touchdown drive that they had, they got the benefit of a nice, defensive pass interference chunk play to get them down towards the end zone. Or actually, no, that was a field goal. I believe the Josh Jacobs run was the one that put him close. It just never got it going. Is that a Jordan Love thing? I think that one of the most disappointing things for me this year was this wide receiving group that I still really like, just didn't take a leap like they probably needed to. Or is that Matt LaFleur or some combination of all? Probably.
I think if we're going to tick down the boxes, starting at Matt LaFleur as the leader of the team, I think he did a lot. And I think you go back to the early season when Malik Willis is their quarterback and they're winning games and they're ripping off big runs and big plays. I think you got to chalk it up to Matt LaFleur doing well. I think that Jordan Love was not the, Toyota-thon Jordan as much as we wanted him to be all year. You look at our AI metrics that we keep at Sumer Sports. He was excellent at making big throws. He made 2 in the Eagles game, both which were kind of, fluky. Jordan Love, back foot, getting pressured, throw it to the back shoulder. One of the only guys in the league that can make that throw, but he makes it. And he was good at not getting sacked, which wasn't necessarily the case against the Eagles. And that was really all he was truly elite at. And I would love to see some of those metrics move forward. And it's kind of the same story with the wide receivers. We thought perhaps Jaden Reed or Romeo Doubs could become that elite guy. And if you're looking at their rankings, whether it's route running, whether it's yards after catch, or our all-in-one metrics that look at everything going on the field at any given point in time, they're just slightly under that wide receiver one certified guy that we want them to be. And that was kind of the story of the offense all year.
They ran the ball very well.
Yep.
We've talked about, like, in what ways did the Packers improve from last year to this year? Their running game, I thought, added a lot of fun wrinkles, a lot more consistent. And part of that was Aaron Jones just wasn't in the lineup every game last year. Josh Jacobs was more available. But they also added in, these spinner actions. And I think some of that bothered Packers fans. Like, why are you running out of shotgun? Because to our eye, that doesn't. But as Matt LaFleur talked about earlier this week, their numbers running out of the gun, I think were pretty good. It was effective. When they hit big plays, they were a very, very good offense. And They did that here and there. The intermediate passing game was a little sloppy. And is that a product of Jordan Love not being polished in year 2 and the wide receivers not being polished in year 2? Is that a detail thing?
I think you can kind of boil it down to the story of what happened with Jaden Reed this year is, frankly, there were moments where he almost looked like a Tyreek Hill comp. Like, he looked like a guy over the course of his career that could just run wild on teams, but he just was not open enough. And that was the case against the Eagles as well. He had a great yards after catch game, a couple catches here and there. He's able to make the most of it. He ends up grading out pretty well, but he's just not open enough. And that's kind of the story with all the guys, whether it's Dobbs or Watson when he's available, is it seems like there's not the space that they need, which is interesting because on the flip side, in the running game, this is a team that not only runs, but runs a lot and runs in moments that are not expected. So typically when you see that, you expect people to load up against the run game and maybe create some more space. We just didn't see that from the Packers wide receivers this year.
Interesting. Do you think Jordan Love, dealing with 2 injuries, missing some practice time, do you think that stunted his ability to progress and to develop this year? How would you, I guess, summarize year number 2 for Jordan Love?
I mean, I question how healthy he was down the stretch just generally. And I think when we're looking at that sack avoidance number and how it kind of took a tailspin in the last couple of weeks, particularly against the Eagles, that's really what shows up, because this is a guy who's been elite in almost every single game he's played prior to this season. So I'm wondering how healthy he is. I definitely think it was, something that stopped the progression of the team as a whole, much less himself.
Sam Bruchhaus is here, Sumer Sports. So the Eagles that defense is filthy. I mean, it's just so talented top to bottom. Was what the Lions did to the Vikings more of an indictment on the Vikings in the season that they had, or is that just the Lions being unbelievable and well? I mean, I'm still floored that Aaron Glenn's defense was the best unit on the field in that Week 18 game.
So it ended up being interesting because the same formula that the Lions used, the Rams pretty much used as well, of we're going to be powerful across our front. We're going to hand it off a bunch of times. But if we're throwing, we're going to try to throw it over the middle. We saw some of those vintage Stafford seam balls, and stuff over the middle to guys like Puka Nacua all throughout the game. And they were spreading it around. The reason why they were spreading it around is because they were attacking the same place over and over and over again on offense. And then on the flip side of the ball, I'm not precisely sure what happened to Sam Darnold. Maybe you can help me out there. We're all a little confused because the guy who seemed to settle down time and time again when things started getting hairy, as they had in his early career, it was like he was back to being 22 again. And both teams were able to get pressured, 9 sacks. And when you're playing a team like the Rams, which has an immensely talented young defensive line, even in excess of the Lions, given the Lions are so injured, you can't just crumble under pressure. And that's what we saw from Sam Darnold. That was really, if you want to highlight it, the only 2 reasons they ended up losing.
Is Kevin O'Connell a little big play happy, deep ball happy as a play caller, you think?
I think he's big play happy because he has Sam Darnold. I think that became a narrative because they felt that was the best way for Sam Darnold to get the ball to Justin Jefferson, to get the ball to Jordan Addison. He had a quote early on in the season. He was like, guess who's going to be our first read all year? Justin Jefferson. And I think that, maybe Darnold struggled with the timing of the early throws. We saw that in the last couple of weeks where he was just kind of off on the short and intermediate throws. And so that ended up being the formula as compared to years before where it wasn't necessarily a big play item with Kirk Cousins.
I'm fascinated to see what happens this weekend in the NFC, but in the AFC, and we can this weekend's gonna be awesome. We can loop back and we can finish with the Packers with some offseason thoughts, but give me the case why this year is going to be different for the Bills or the Ravens. In that we've convinced ourselves in previous years, like, no, this is the year it's all lining up for them, and then it just hasn't happened.
So for the record, I've been on the Ravens back since they were not really winning games, and it was getting a little dicey. It was close games.
Before their defense kind of put it together and Zach Orr figured out earlier this year.
Correct. Exactly. And then the defense put it together. And now even you look at the aggregate for the year, and this is one of the better defenses in the league. That was not the story for like 10 weeks. Basically what they ended up changing was they figured out that Stevens, the cornerback, was not allowing separation, but was struggling when closing. So they kind of moved him around. Now all of a sudden Marlon Humphrey's in the slot. Kyle Hamilton's playing a little bit, north of where he generally plays in that strong safety position. And they were already a pretty good run defense, and they're locked in the passing game all of a sudden. I think it's the Ravens. I think the Ravens are going to be different. I think the Bills are, merchants of a brilliant Josh Allen year. I'm not sure how good this team really is, particularly on defense. They have a couple good players at key positions, much like the Rams do. They have Deion Dawkins at left tackle. They have Greg Rousseau, Von Miller, and Epinesa at the edge rushing positions, and Taron Johnson, causing havoc in the slot corner position. But other than that, this is not the most talented team, particularly at the wide receiver position and typically in the defensive backfield as well.
Interesting. Do you think the Ravens are going to come out of the AFC?
That is my pick. It's been my pick since week one. I'm like locked in on them. I think the progression of their back end and the progression of their offensive front makes all the difference.
All right. I can buy into that. Let's transition back to the Packers, because you said you had some thoughts on what they should do in the offseason, maybe where they should go in the draft. I actually wanted to ask you about the Rams as they pertain to the Packers, because what the Rams have done on defense with all of that youth is Packers fans have hoped for. All of this capital that the Packers have invested in defense, right? They just over and over, these guys along the front or these guys at linebacker, and they're fine players, but they're not players that I like leap out of bed in the morning to get excited about the idea of paying them a second contract. And the Rams have how can the Packers get young talent along that defense the way that the Rams have? Because I think that's, maybe going to be one of their goals.
So I want to push back on one of those. Edge Cooper is the man.
Oh yeah, he's yes.
Holy moly!
I leap out of
play. He is the man. I'm a former linebacker, and he gets the juices flowing a little bit. He can really do it all.
Or what specifically?
He can do it all. And this was a guy that the analytics weren't super big on coming out of the draft, and our scouts are really like, this dude can play. And so we kept digging, and we started to put together an analytical case that made sense. I think he wasn't necessarily in the right defense at Texas A&M, and boy, was he in the right defense with the Packers. The man can cover, the man can rush the passer, and the man can stop the run. So I love Edge Cooper, but you look at these consensus team needs, and it's these analysts who look across every mock draft on the internet, and they compile what positions are drafted in these mock drafts by the teams, and you hit the nail on the head. Cornerback, defensive line, edge rusher. This is a very good edge rushing draft. I had Mike Renner from CBS Sports on my new podcast, Draft FM, which you can find wherever you find podcasts or video on YouTube. And he thinks that this edge class, starting with Abdul Carter at the top and including guys like Michael Williams from Georgia, is just extremely deep. And there's going to be guys even into day two that are really going to be impactful players. I think that's kind of where they're planning to go here in terms of the Packers.
Well, let me ask you this, and if this is too Packers centric for you, and I don't think it will, but you could just tell me. But I heard from Matt LaFleur in his end of season presser, they expected more from the front four. They expected them to be able to get home without blitzing more. And then Goody kind of said the same thing. So is that we thought these players would be better, or we thought that maybe their positional coaches would be able to do the details better? Like where was that disconnect with this unit? Because I thought the defensive line was going to be awesome this year as well, and they were fine.
Yeah, I agree. They were fine. And you kind of get a microcosm of it in the Eagles game as well. There was some good plays from the interior D lineman, Colby Wooden in particular, but it was just like average. And they weren't really forcing Jalen Hurts to make mistakes. Really, Jalen Hurts was making the mistake kind of all himself. He really didn't end up too well in any of our metrics, 40th percentile in all-in-one passing. And generally, when you see that, you expect on the back end there to be some really great metrics for in coverage or across the front. We really didn't see that from the Packers. It's kind of the microcosm of the year. Things worked out. They ended up being a big play defense, particularly with Xavier McKinney back there. But you got to get some apex talent in there, and we just haven't seen that from some of the guys across the front.
These players like Quay Walker, I think Quay Walker, especially when paired next to Cooper, like I like that a lot more than one of them individually. And I think he was really gutting through an ankle. And like Devontae Wyatt's been nice. I maybe wouldn't go so far as to say Lucas Van Ness has been nice. They've been fine players. They haven't been bad. They just haven't hit on a Jared Verse. Like that's the guy I look at with the Rams. Like if you could get one, and maybe Cooper is obviously kind of their version of that. The game that you're excited most about this weekend before I let you go?
Man, Lions Commanders. I love Jaden Daniels. I was kind of on him very, very early at LSU, even before the Heisman hoopla got going. And the thing to watch is Dan Quinn is very aggressive on fourth down to match Dan Campbell. They did it in the playoff game. And like, there's a case that this game may have like 6 fourth down conversions. It's going to be a wild one. Whoever wins that battle of, the key core plays, and it may end up being early and it may end up leading to a blowout for the Lions. I think the Lions are a substantially better team, but early on, those kind of crux plays, it's going to be interesting to see how those break. And I think they're both going to be aggressive, and whoever is able to convert is going to win this game.
I'm sure the talking heads will react with great measure about which team doesn't get the fourth downs. I'm sure that won't be spun as the reason a team wins or loses. Well, enjoy the games this weekend. Thank you for kind of, doing a referendum on what happened with the Packers. And I guess I'll see you at the Super Bowl. We're really close.
Yeah, I'm really excited, Grant. See you soon.
Yeah, see you soon, Sam. Thanks for the time. Sam Bruchhaus, Sumer Sports. His interview with Mike Renner was excellent. I listened to it, and I would recommend that you do the same. Draft FM. It's a good podcast. And I'm not even a draft guy. I'm not that big. I'm not a draft nerd. You know this. I talk about baseball in the spring or college basketball. I'm not a draft nerd. Back to your calls about the Brewers and Bob Uecker. Mike Clemens around the corner as well later in the show to react a little bit to Brian Gutekunst. A lot still yet to come on the Wisco Sports Show.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes.
You know, one of the best things about being an ex-big leaguer is getting freebies to the game. Call the front office, bingo. And once these fans recognize me, I probably won't even have to pay for my light beer from Miller. Down it! I love them. These fans know I drink light because it's less filling and it tastes great. Good seats, huh?
You're in the wrong seat, buddy. Come on.
Oh, I must be in the front row.
Come on.
Light beer from Miller. Everything you always wanted in a beer and less.
Good seats, hey, buddy? He missed the tag! He missed the tag!
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Guys like Bob, there was Bob, Jack Buck, Vince Scully, Harry Carey. I grew up with Al Michaels and Marty Brenneman in Cincinnati. What makes that broadcaster so good and feel so loved by so many?
Well, the local broadcaster, especially in baseball, has a different relationship with the audience than a national broadcaster could ever possibly have. And so personality is part of it. Everyone you mentioned has a distinct personality. But you have to have the craftsmanship. You have to have the skill. And even into the latter portions of his life, Bob had that skill. He knew how to capture a moment. And as I said, even if he never said anything funny, which is hard to imagine in Ueck's case, he, just as a straight baseball play-by-play man, he was one of the very best.
It's the legend Bob Costas on with Bill earlier today. That'll be at the beginning of hour number 3. If you want that full interview, he's on at noon. Yeah, that'd be hour number 3, the Bill Michaels Show podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again to Sam Bruchhaus for coming on Zoomer Sports. Excited to have him on again at the Super Bowl and talk more Packers, talk more about the NFL playoffs at large. Need to get back to the Brewers and talking about Bob Uecker. A couple of texts I'm behind. Duck from Holman says this one's going to hurt a while. Ouch. I would agree. Look, the other thing, and I was talking in my family group chat about this today as well. The dude was 90. So we can also feel really lucky, and we can take solace in the idea that, oh God, this is going to happen eventually, right? And to think if he lives to 74, that's a ripe old age. We got him another 15 years. You know, to consider how lucky we are as Brewers fans and baseball fans. Robin Stoddard says the best memory of Uecker is the 2011 NLDS. I was a kid in elementary school, up way past his bedtime to hear that call. Also, have you ever had a caller doing push-ups or sit-ups well on air, or am I the first? Are you just flexing that you're flexing? You're just bragging about how you're working out, Rob? Sneaky. I appreciate it. Sneaky, but I see through it. Transparent. Matt in Chippewa Falls said, my grandma had a radio that I still use today. It's probably 30 years old, and we've listened to thousands of Brewer games on that radio. Man, I'm going to listen or miss hearing Uecker's voice on that radio, having brats and some Miller Lights for supper, RIP. Yeah, everyone, who was it earlier? Dean and Eau Claire mentioned the barn radio. The barn radio or the garage radio that's on 24 hours a day. Like, you can picture the thing. I don't have a garage, so it's not, I don't have a garage. But I can think of the one in my parents' garage. It sits on top of the garage fridge, which you can also picture a garage fridge, little yellowed, little worn. Alan O'Clair says, I'm bummed out that Bob Uecker's gone. I had a feeling that when he signed out after that Mets game, that it would be the last time. As a friend today, after listening to a recording of that sign-off, it sure seems like he knew it. I'll miss him. Calling him Mr. Baseball is not hyperbole. That is a very good bit of analysis. Calling him Mr. Baseball is not hyperbole. And that's what I said back at 4 o'clock. I'll reiterate it after we reset the show here after Zach's huddle. I think the reason that we love Uecker so much, the memories and the jokes and all of that, of course, the reason we love him so much is deep down, we all love baseball so much. And baseball makes us feel a way that no other sport can make us feel. And he is baseball. And that kind of landed with me when I was cutting all these highlights and watching all these old, Brewers moments. I'm like, oh my God, the sport's the best. And Bob Uecker is the sport. So we'll continue to talk about that next 2 minutes. No commercials. We'll get an update from Zach Heilprin.
This is a Wisconsin Sports Zone update.
Well, the tributes for legendary Brewers broadcaster Bob Uecker continue to pour in this afternoon. The team announced this morning that the icon had passed away at the age of 90. While Uecker was known as being a very funny guy in his roles in film and TV, he was also very much a baseball guy. One of his broadcast partners during his long career was Bob Costas when they were both at NBC. He joined the Bill Michaels Show earlier today.
You have to have the craftsmanship. You have to have the skill. And even into the latter portions of his life, Bob had that skill. He knew how to capture a moment. And as I said, even if he never said anything funny, which is hard to imagine in Ueck's case, he, just as a straight baseball play-by-play man, he was one of the very best.
Uecker spent 54 seasons as Milwaukee's play-by-play announcer. The team released a statement earlier in the day which said, in part, saying goodbye to Bob shakes us all. He was so much more than a Milwaukee Brewers icon. He was a national treasure. Bob entertained us with his words and his storytelling, so it's no surprise that his passing now leaves us at a loss for our own words. Again, Bob Uecker passed away this morning at the age of 90.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Rural Mutual is the #1 farm insurer in Wisconsin for a good reason. As a company founded by farmers, they understand the ag industry and its challenges. Local agents offer farm families the best advice and personalized coverage. Visit ruralmutual.com to find an agent near you.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Well, GM Brian Gutekunst said it's time for the Packers to start competing for championships. He held his end of the season press conference today, said they've made strides, but what they've done hasn't been enough. Also said that they will have to work through some things with Jair Alexander on a contract front, but there's not a disconnect between the team and the star corner. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil, Print.
This broadcast once again is authorized by the Milwaukee Brewers Baseball Club, intended solely for the entertainment of our listening audience. Any rebroadcast or other use without the expressed written consent of the Milwaukee Brewers Baseball Club is prohibited.
For all of these years, it's been a great run, but #1 has always been baseball for me. No matter what else I ever did, baseball was the only way I wanted to go.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
Everyone's got a Bob Uecker story today that they're posting on Twitter or, talking about on the radio or TV, and that's fine. I don't really have one. I rode an elevator with him last summer, told a joke, made everyone laugh. I don't remember what it was. But, we all grew up listening to him, and we'd stay up late with the radio on. We all share that memory. So instead of, trying to talk about my memories and feelings about Bob Uecker, as I play all these highlights and cut all these moments, I'm like, man, really what it is for me, it's a love of baseball and a realization that baseball can make you feel a way that no other sport can. And Bob Uecker has made us feel this way because he is baseball. He's Mr. Baseball. So that's kind of my take on it today. I don't really have a story, although I did see this. I saw this. This was posted right before the show started. I bookmarked it, and I forgot to bring it up until now. This is a really funny Uecker story. It's really random. It's Aaron Sims, the voice of the Admirals, who joins Bill throughout the Admirals season quite a bit. He tweeted, this is so random. He tweeted this. We'll never forget when the Brewers were horrible, Bob Uecker explaining to Jim Powell how in the hotel the night before, he decided to learn something about cooking. So he turned on the Spice Network to get some tips. He was shocked how there was so little talk of herbs. The best. Just so stupid. It's so stupid. Made me laugh. It's often the stupidest things that make me laugh. If you have a Uecker story or a thought or a memory, we're just kind of gathering. And I wouldn't even say commiserating because I don't know that Brewers fans feel miserable. We're sad that he's gone, but I think today more than anything, an opportunity to celebrate and to think about how lucky we've been for so long to be able to enjoy Bob Uecker as a supplement to a game, and as more than a supplement, as a huge part of a game that I think we all love so much. And I claim that when baseball is at its best, it gives you something that no other sport can give you. And the reason that Bob Uecker makes us feel the way that we feel is because he is Mr. Baseball. He is just an extension of that feeling we get from a sport and from a team that we all love so much. And I saw earlier today, who said it? I've bookmarked so much Uecker stuff today. Someone tweeted earlier today, maybe I didn't bookmark it, basically saying, I think it was Bob Nightingale. Funny, it was Bob. He tweeted 5 hours ago, no one in Brewers history has ever been so loved. I think Bob is bigger than any player, He's bigger than anything. And I think that's a cool part of Brewers fandom, in that Brewers fans, more than the Packers, more than the Bucks, we will cheer for that logo before we cheer for we will cheer for the name on the front of the jersey, never the back. Whereas with the Packers, I think a lot of people, when Favre was kind of maybe pushed away, some people sided with Favre, or some people didn't like that. Like there was a Favre faction and a Packers faction. Same with Rodgers. With the Bucks, I think there's a lot of people who are huge Giannis fans. And when he leaves, their Bucks fandom probably won't be the same, and that's understandable. With the Brewers, man, if you come in here and wear that jersey and perform, we will love you until you're gone, and then we'll probably hate you. And I think that speaks to a franchise that maybe doesn't have a Los Angeles Lakers or Green Bay Packers type history of Mount Rushmore superstar Hall of Fame players. Fair. Although the Brewers have had their fair share. But Brewers fans, and Uecker is an extension of this as well, we will cheer for the name on the front of the jersey before we cheer for the name on the back. And I think that's unique to the Brewers and unique to the sport of maybe baseball in a way that it doesn't match up with football or basketball. 608-321-1670. Let's take some calls. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
It's Darnell.
Hey, Darnell. What's going on?
Hey, I don't have a Uecker story that I know. Like, I never met the guy personally or anything like that, but I feel like I knew him.
I was going to say, but it feels like you know him.
Yeah. Like, I feel like, oh yeah, Grandpa Bob, like he was there every summer. Like he was in my living room every single summer, just talking about sports and talking about baseball and talking about using your sausage and, putting ads into baseball in the most precise and perfect way that you don't even know you're listening to ads. It was fantastic. And really, I didn't grow up with cable. So I never got to watch any of the games ever. So I was just listening to them because I love the Brewers, but I just didn't get a chance to watch them unless they were randomly on Fox every couple months, So just got to listen to Bob talk about how crappy the Brewers were and how, well, maybe they'll win 80 games this year. That'd be really cool, And then, they finally broke through with the 2008 postseason appearance, and I think that gave Uecker a little bit more life too. He was so starved of it, and then the last decade plus was really just golden Bob Uecker, season after season of just fantastic calls. Not that he didn't have good calls in the 90s and 2000s either, but just some iconic ones from my childhood.
He just didn't have many plays to crank it up for. Like it wasn't a him thing. It was the product he was narrating.
Exactly. And then I still think that 2018 something went wrong with the Matrix there, because that was supposed to be Ueck's year to call a World Series.
Yeah, you say a lot of those. The Matrix has boned us quite a few times. This last year, it felt like just beating the Mets was kind of our World Series. I don't know why this last fall, I had just get me to the second round. Like I needed that as badly as I've ever needed anything. And in previous seasons, it didn't feel that way. Like in previous seasons, I want to go on a run. Last year, I was literally like, I just want to beat the Mets. And whatever comes next, I'll deal with. But just God help, just please advance.
Well, and I was super, super unproductive at work because I was just looking at all kinds of, Uecker videos and unfortunately rewatching a lot of stuff from October.
Mm-hmm.
And all those players they were being told, right, that he was going downhill, because every single one of them was crying.
Yeah.
It didn't look like end of season crying. It looked like this is the last time that we're going to get to do baseball with Bob.
Yeah. Well, and I can give you some of those details. Kurt put an awesome story out at the Journal-Sentinel today. Appreciate it, Darnell, about, what some of those players, especially Yelich, kind of came to learn, especially right after that loss. That Uecker was, he battled through this last season. He was in a lot of pain. And they knew, and I go back to that Yelich presser at the locker. He's got tears in his eyes, and I would die for Christian Yelich now more than ever. And I tweeted earlier today, he gets it. He understands what it means to be the highly paid guy on the Milwaukee Brewers. and he carries that responsibility maturely and does a really good job. And I wish some, Green Bay Packers would do that. We've had those conversations this week. We don't need to get into that right now. Back to your calls, though, as promised, 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Eric on I-90.
Good evening, Eric on I-90. How are you, Eric?
Good evening, Grant. I'm fine. I'm sad. I'm sad of the news today. And, Grant, you know I'm not really a big baseball fan, And when I get in this car and I start heading down the Super Slab in the summertime, a lot of times, they'll break in with a Brewer game.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times when the announcer would come on, if it was Bob Uecker, I would listen to the game. If it wasn't, I would turn the channel.
Mm-hmm.
So Bob Uecker kept me company out here on I-90 many nights, and I would listen to Bob Uecker. I would listen to Bob Uecker call a game, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm going to miss it. And about it, Grant, about it.
Man, I better not tip over and die. If I go down all of a sudden, what are you going to do on I-90 every night?
I don't know. It's a long, lonely drive out here, and you guys keep me company. You guys keep me company. So I appreciate it, and I'm going to always appreciate Bob Uecker. What a guy. What a guy.
What a life lived. I mean, you're calling through, and Eric, you're well, I don't know this to be true, but I would assume on some level you're an appreciator of history, right? This man called baseball games through, I mean, how much American history passed by the ballpark in the booth as he's sitting there calling baseball games.
Right. A lot. No, he's a Wisconsin icon, and he always will be, and he will be deeply missed.
He will. Eric, I appreciate Bob Uecker. I appreciate you. Thank you for the call. And that, part of that speaks to the magic of radio too. And the medium that it kind of like baseball in that, I'm not saying I would prefer radio to a TV, just like I wouldn't say I would prefer baseball to the NFL because it's the NFL. But man, when baseball is at its best, I still think it's better and it gives you a feeling that you can't get anywhere else. And I think, when radio's at its best and when you're in a spot to sit there and listen and enjoy it, I think you can get a feeling from that you can't get from your television set or your TikTok or your iPad. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant.
Coyote Mike.
Yeah, it's me again. So
don't sound so excited, huh? Mike. Jeez. Oh, it's me. I know.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to be sad. It was a very touching morning this morning. So I'm having a beer in honor of Bob right now. So, but 70 is getting up there, huh? I turned 70 this summer. So,
well, and when I said that, I'm aware it's like, well, my dad's closer to 70 than 60, I think. Doing the math, like 70's not ancient, but you know what I mean? It's not like someone turns 87 all of a sudden and out of nowhere, you're like, well, they're getting up there. Like, no, not.
Well, yeah, and you go somewhere, you go to the bar or the restaurant, and you go, oh, look at all those old people over there. Like,
is that what you do?
That's one of me. Yeah. We walked into Schmitty's once, Grant, in La Crosse.
Oh, yeah.
And this was some years ago, like 5, 6, 7 years ago. And everybody in there is all gray hairs.
Mm-hmm.
And they turn around and look at me and my dad, and they're staring at me. And I'm going like, why are they staring at me? And then I'm figuring, because I'm old just like them. And they're trying to figure out who I am. So, but I wanted to say about Bob Uecker. I listened to him, the first games he broadcast all the way up until the end. And I can't say anything more than anybody else has already said about how fantastic of an announcer and a person he was. Just a real staple, a real cornerstone of the Brewers, and always will be remembered that way. And he used to, my story is that I never had the honor of meeting him, but when I was a kid, we'd listen to our old Zenith transistor radio. We'd be playing softball, baseball, and before the game, him and Merle Harmon would do the pregame, and Merle Harmon would introduce him one year. I think it was his second or third year, and maybe some of your other listeners, like Clemhead Mike or Denny or Uncle Packer, those old time listeners, he would Merle Harmon would introduce him, and he would say, "Now, just back from his convention in Fort Wayne, Indiana, where he addressed the convention of light bulb manufacturers."
Yeah.
And Bob would come on and start telling the stories about these conventions that he would, and they were silly conventions. And Merle Harmon is playing a straight guy, you know, like Johnny Carson, and he's cracking up. And some of the stories were so funny, but yet so believable. At one time, I turned to my dad and I said, "Did he really go to a convention of, you know, pipe fitters or compass manufacturers?" You know, but he was just fantastic. And gosh, I made sure I listened to his sign off that last game, because it was not very hopeful, just based on how he kind of looked and what everybody said. That things are going on. So,
and I listen. I'll never forget this. I've lived in Coyote Mike. I appreciate it. I've listened since I graduated college in 2020, and I say graduated loosely because basically I got an email that said you're good, and then I moved out, and that was that, because it was the deep throes of the pandemic in March, April, May of 2020. But since I've graduated, I've lived in 5 different apartments in 5 years. I will never forget. I could move out of my current apartment tomorrow. I will never forget where I was sitting, what was in that living room, how it's decorated, how the couch looks, how the couch feels. I was home alone during this Brewer game, and I was listening to the radio call on the broadcast, because shout out to Big Ron, who I poked fun at to start the show yesterday. And I'm sorry, Big Ron, but I will also now I'll compliment Big Ron. Big Ron, who lives out in Jersey, was nice enough at some point last summer to DM me on Twitter with his MLB extra innings login or whatever, which I never really used. I used once to watch a Cubs game, but that night I'm like, I think I can use that to listen to the radio broadcast. And of course I could listen to it on a radio, but if I could use my laptop, I could slow it down to match up with the TV, which I know a lot of people do, but I never do. If I'm watching on TV, I'll listen to the TV. But I'm like, it's a huge game. It's game 3 of a 3-game series. It's the Brewers season on the line. It's to advance, and I kind of felt good about them advancing. I love Levering. I love Uecker. I'm going to take this game in through them, and I'll never forget that, even though in some ways I wish I could, because that loss was as bad as any loss outside of 2014 in that Packers NFC Championship game. 608-321-1670. 2 more calls, then we're going to take a break. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
This is Dewey in Durand.
What's going on, Dewey? Good evening.
Hey, Grant. I shouldn't even joke on a somber day like today. I just wanted to say, so the Brewers made the playoffs in 1982, and then not again for 26 seasons until 2008. So those 26 seasons were kind of the meat of the Bob Uecker broadcasting sandwich. So day after day, unless he was off doing a national game or doing Carson or whatever, he was calling these games. And the Brewers were pretty drab throughout that whole time. I know less teams made the playoffs, but they would pop up maybe once every 5 or 6 seasons, be decent, and then going back to just being not very good. They had robbing you out and not much else. I mean, I don't want to get hyperbolic here, but if without Bob Uecker adding color, to the Brewers, especially in a time when maybe 70 to 80 games were televised instead of every game like today, I kind of think that interest in the Brewers might have waned. I mean, Miller Park got passed by a single vote in the legislature or the assembly or whatever it is. I kind of think that without Bob Uecker kind of spicing up those really lean years, baseball may have left Milwaukee for the second time.
Yeah, I think it's definitely if nothing else, and maybe that stadium ends up getting built and maybe it works, Dewey, I appreciate it. If nothing else, how many Brewers fans held on and now can reference memories. I mean, you talk to some Brewers fans of a certain age, the fans who were just young enough to have missed the World Series teams. That team in the early 90s, what was it, 93? That's to some people their favorite Brewer team. They won 90-some games, didn't make the playoffs because of the format at the time. And I think Uecker's a part of that. And I also think the low standards, and fans of the Brewers still have low standards, which is why it's both a fun and a torturous team to cheer for. Uecker was a part of that for sure. And if nothing else, I don't know about the legislative aspect, but if nothing else, fan interest and memories and all that stuff, which is how fandom is passed down from one generation to a next, which is how a team continues to grow and succeed and maintain a fan base. Really quick break, 3-minute break. If you're on hold, there's 2 of you that I see. If you can wait 3 minutes, I promise I'll get to you right away. I just don't want to be late for Mike Clemens at 5:30. I want to stick to a schedule. So more of your calls, a little bit more Bob Uecker talk next, and then we'll get the latest from Green Bay, what Brian Gutekunst had to say earlier today. Mike Clemens in about 10 or 12 minutes.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes.
Let me buy a beer. Sure. These fans, I love them. When I came in, they didn't recognize me at first, but then when I told them who I was, next thing you know, they're buying me my favorite beer, light beer from Miller. They know us ex-big leaguers drink light because it's got a third less calories than their regular beer. It's less filling, and it tastes great. Thanks. Hey, it's a pleasure to buy a beer for a great pitcher like Whitey Ford. Hey, Whitey. So I lied.
Light beer from Miller. Everything you always wanted in a beer, and less.
Hey, Whitey, I thought you were a lefty. Oh, that's right.
And this place is going bonkers. All right, here we go with Ryan Braun. The pitch to him. Swing and a drive. Left center and deep. Get up. Get out of here. Gone for Ryan Braun. And they've got the lead. Whoa, what a shot by Braun. It's his 37th of the year.
Watched a lot of Ryan Braun highlights today. A lot of Ryan Braun highlights today. A lot of Brewers highlights. A lot of Bob Uecker moments. Little change of plan. So I was talking with Mike earlier today, and he said, I'll come on at 5:30. But before that, I'm going to hop on a little Zoom call with Brewers people and Wisconsin reporters because Mark Attanasio is speaking to the media. I said, all right, that's fine. You can come on, talk afterwards. And he texted me and said, actually, they're going to make some others available to the media. It's going to keep going. Do you want me to do Packers? You want me to keep doing that? I said, Mike, go do that. We'll keep talking about Bob Uecker. It'll be fine. And at the end of the show, we might get to a little Brian Gutekunst audio anyways. There's really only 2 comments that I'm interested in digging deeper into. Tomorrow, maybe we'll get a little deeper into it, but tonight we can look. Give me, I don't need an excuse to keep talking baseball. Trust me. We got loaded phone lines, so let's keep going. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant. DW from New Glarus.
DW, the mayor. It's been a while, DW. How you been?
Good. Yourself?
Not too bad. A little sad today, but it's nice to celebrate a life lived with Brewers fans. Good excuse to talk baseball in January.
Got a quick story for you. Back in 1983, I was about 16 years old. My buddy was writing for the Deerfield Independent.
Okay.
So he got to go down to, and I was his cameraman.
Deerfield had a newspaper?
Yep, Deerfield Independent. My buddy was a sports reporter, and I was his cameraman for the day. So he got to go into the Brewers locker room and talk to a couple of players like, Gorman Thomas, Ben Ogilvy, that genre.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden Bob Uecker walks in. And Craig and I got our picture taken with Bob Uecker, and I'll never, ever forget that. That guy is so genuine. Just an amazing man. Very fun-loving. He's a great ambassador for the game of baseball. And that's all I wanted to say. I just wanted to say that was really cool. I got to meet him personally, and when he was a lot younger, but 90 years is a full life, and sad today because of his passing, but I kind of expected it because, when you see Preston Yelich and a couple other grown men crying, talking to Bob Uecker, something was up. So,
yeah. And you just never know, like the last couple of years, DW, I appreciate it. And now I need to learn more about the Deerfield Independent down towards Deerfield, Cambridge. I'm curious. Everyone today has been like, well, when he seemed say, I figured something might be up. I figured, it makes sense that he's sick. Sick or not, he was 90. That's so old. So like every year for the last 5 years, I've been thinking, yeah, who knows? You hope Uecker's back, but you never know. You can't take it for granted. And to get him for this many years and for him to be doing it up until a couple months before he passed away. And Kurt reported on some details of what, some of those players knew and exactly what Uecker was going through at the end. And I'll share some of that with you. I don't want to give you the entirety of Kurt's article. Go buy the paper tomorrow, buy the Journal Sentinel, or subscribe because it's cheap anyways. And it's great reporting. Todd had a great story today, Rosiak as well, that you should read. 608-321-1670, Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Second cousin Mike.
Second cousin Mike. How's it going, Mike?
It's a bad day.
Yeah, it's sad.
We lost a legend.
Do you have a garage radio or a shed radio or something that would always have the Brewers on?
Oh, I did. And I'm thinking back to 82 when I had a little transistor radio that I held to my head.
Held to your head? Oh, you would hold it up in your hand? I was picturing for a second there like it was attached to a headband or something like that.
No, we didn't have that back then.
You didn't have headbands back then?
A little 4x6 radio that you could hold to your head and listen to the game. And I remember in 82 going out to, who Big Jim is.
Mm-hmm.
Sitting in his Buick while my sister was playing volleyball because I had to listen to the World Series.
Yep.
But one of my fondest memories of Bob was in 2020 when we had no baseball, but they just kept playing all the old great games. Made things seem a little normal in a crazy environment.
Yeah. Thinking back to 2020, and I forgot about that, Mike. That's, first of all, the Buick detail is an awesome memory, and that just speaks to how, again, radio kind of supercharges our awareness for our surroundings and memories and emotions, from while we're listening, especially to, it's a World Series, for God's sake. I just, thinking back to 2020, a summer without baseball for that many months. Like how messed up that was. You know what I mean? Like, okay, I can't see my friends. All right. Stay separated for a couple of weeks, but not having baseball on the radio every day, that's a piece of America. And also the owners were money grubbers over that, and so was the league. We don't need to get back into that, but I remember that summer doing a show every day. It's like, hey, you guys ever want to like get baseball back on? Or okay, you just want to do 60 games because you don't want to lose money. All right, fine. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
This is Gabe's.
Gabe's. What's going on, Gabe's? Bet a bit. How's lacrosse?
Hey, this is my story I've told thousand people at least. My brush with Bob Uecker was I was a screen printer. I'm 61, so I was in my mid-20s. And all of a sudden there was an impromptu tour. Well, we've seen tours all the time. Normally it was with salespeople, but this was the vice president and the president of the company. And I took a look at this person coming through, and I'm like, man, it looks like Bob Uecker. He got closer. I'm like, I knew that was Bob Uecker, right? I got a Brewer cap on. It's got ink smudges. I got a Brewer schedule on my press. So he stops. He's looking at me doing some screen printing. It's a clamshell. I won't bore you with that, but basically you put a sheet in the machine and it comes down and it prints ink on it. Anyway, he's watching me do a couple sheets. I take it off of automatic, put it on single cycle, and I go, Bob, do you want to print one?
Yeah.
I go, you hit these two pens, slide it over, and he goes, sure. Yeah. So he does a sheet, and he's like, yay, I remember that. And I go, you're a screen printer, Bob. And the owner is kind of giving me a wide eye. Impromptu stuff, but
yeah, imagine if Bob Uecker would have
but
broken someone or broken something or hurt his finger. It's just a rat's
yeah,
nest
it
of
had a
liability
guy.
for you.
It
Okay.
was, yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I was like, I had to do it. I was dumb in my 20s.
You get your one shot to say something, interact with Bob Uecker. You got to take it. I appreciate that, Gabe. I passed by him spring training once or twice, and I'm just someone, when you throw me in environments where I don't belong. So in a baseball clubhouse or at Super Bowl Radio Row, I don't belong there. So I act like I belong. And when you act like you belong, you're just like, oh, it's Bob Uecker. It's no big deal. I see him all the time. It's a coworker, basically. Never seen anything too much. Plus, with celebrities, with people you really look up to, like, you never know. That person could be having a bad day. And what would just like make me want to end it all is if I went and said, I'm a big fan, just wanted to say hey and say thank you. What if that, what if he's having a miserable day and he's like, oh, big fan, nice, I'm trying to go home. It's like, okay, well, that's forever. You know what I mean? It's forever ruined. Not that I think Bob Uecker would have done that, but I'm constantly afraid of it. We had Jordan Love on at the Super Bowl last year. I didn't even ask for a picture. Why not? He said, why would I ask for a picture for Jordan Love? I mean, it's just a quarterback around Radio Row. It happens all the time. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant. It's Luke from Fall Creek.
How's it going, Luke? How's Fall Creek?
It's Creek. Don't get it mixed up.
Sadder today, I bet, in Fall Creek.
You know what? I'm going to take the positive part about this.
Okay.
Instead of being glass half empty, let's be glass half full, Wisconsin. He wasn't just Mr. Baseball. He was Mr. Wisconsin. Let's celebrate his life. 90 years of age. Had a great time. We lived, as Brewer fans, we lived his life. We listened to his stories. We watched Major League. We did everything through Bob Uecker. And Grant, I got laid off from work today. I'm more concerned about Bob Uecker's passing than my own work.
Like a seasonal layoff, or like a hey, out of nowhere, we're not going to need you anymore type of layoff?
Seasonal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah. But guys, ladies, let's be positive about Bob Uecker's 90 years on this earth. Major League. I mean, just a bit outside. I mean, all of what Bob Uecker did for the country, I'm not even going to say the state, the country of Wisconsin. Come on, guys. Have a Miller Lite or whatever you drink for Bob Uecker tonight.
I'll have one tonight. A light beer from Miller. I'll have one tonight. I appreciate it, Luke. Good luck with your employment search, or in the case, some people get seasonally unemployed. They are seasonally unemployed. So whatever, comes next for you, good luck or enjoy it, I guess. It's sad because this is a day that Brewers fans, we knew that this day would happen and never wanted it to happen. But the fact that we got 90 years, I'm with you, Luke. We got 90 years with the guy. All right. One more call and then we got to get to break. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hi, it's Brenda.
Brenda. Oh my God. I was wondering if you were even around anymore. It's nice to hear your voice.
Yes, I'm still around. No, so I'm 52, and I don't remember really ever listening to Brewers games without Uecker announcing.
Yeah.
And it's going to be hard when the season starts, and to just think we're never going to hear him announce again, other than in replays. Which, that's great. And he was such a nice guy. He was so genuine. I actually got the chance to meet him. I was actually an extra on the film of Major League. Thank you very much.
Were you in the stadium at County Stadium?
I was in County Stadium, yes. We sat there and baked out in the sun all day to be an extra on Major League. And he actually took time and met a few of people. He was walking around the stadium the day I was there. I don't remember if it was actually a game that day or I can't remember exactly what was going on, but he was actually at the stadium that day. And we ran into him walking around, and he was shaking hands and meeting people, and he was just a really genuine, nice guy. And like I said, I don't remember ever going through a Brewer season without hearing Uecker.
Yeah, I mean, you're 52. I'm 26, and I've never known, but I've also, and I'd have to go back and look. I don't remember the Packers pre-Larrabee, but to be, 52 years on this planet, I'm not calling you old, Brenda. My point is that's not an insignificant amount of time. Once upon a time, there was a 7-year-old who was like, I don't remember life before Joe Block. I don't know why I made the 7-year-old sound old and drunk. They would say who's this guy? Where's Joe Block? It's probably more how they would sound. But to live an entire life as a baseball fan, basically, with one voice, and how lucky are we? We'll continue to talk about this next. A little more Brewers audio. I also have some anecdotes from Kurt Hoag's story today that I want to share. I would encourage you, urge you to subscribe to the Journal Sentinel or to read Kurt's work and support him in one way or another. But I will give you some anecdotes because his story was excellent today, and so was Rosiak's. But a couple of tidbits from Kurt that I want to pass along next.
Zone Radio Network.
All right, maybe I wasn't the greatest player of all time, but fans, they forgive and forget. When I go in here, they'll be buying me my favorite beer, light beer from Miller. You, Bob Uecker? Yeah, how you doing? These fans, I love them. They know us ex-big leaguers drink light because it's less filling and it tastes great. Well, can't keep the gang waiting. The fans are always joking.
Light beer from Miller. Everything you always wanted in a beer, and less.
Wow, they're having a good time in there.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
I mean, it's special every time he's around. So, I shouldn't take it for granted. He's the man. He means a lot of his plays. Anybody that's just maybe coming down knows how to get special models.
Yeah, we can see the eyes. We've been through a lot tonight. Just take us through, like, what's the thinking? What's the emotion for that? Is it an over, or is it the run that you had, or?
No, for me, it was talking to you. That's kind of all the other stuff is, it is what it is. It's a tough way for your season to end. But, talking to Ricky. It's tough.
I know it's difficult to hear that. And maybe you're like, yeah, Grant, it wasn't difficult. We straight up couldn't hear it. Well, I'm sorry. If you couldn't make out those comments from Christian Yelich, hopefully you got the sense. Hopefully you got what I was trying to communicate. Yelich in tears after the loss last year. And a lot of people put 2 and 2 together because of reporting on Twitter and things that, people like Kurt, you can hear his questioning in there, said, yeah, Yelich had just talked with Uecker. He was making the rounds, and I think it was becoming clear to Yelich and some of the other veterans or some of the other people that have been around the club for a while that Uecker was probably done. And even again, if Uecker was perfectly healthy, which we learned that he wasn't, he was 90. So the idea that anything was guaranteed moving forward after any of these last couple of seasons obviously is just silly. 608-321-1670. I'm going to get back to the calls here in 2 or 3 minutes. Some details from Kurt Hoag's story at the Journal-Sentinel today. And I'm going to paraphrase. I'm not going to give it all to you because I want you to go read the story and subscribe to his work. But he's describing the scene after the game. There inside the clubhouse, the manager convened with outfielder Yelich and GM Matt Arnold, two of his closest allies. Together, the three men talked and cried out of a morose reality that few others outside the room were aware of. Quote, "We sat there and talked about how this could be. This probably was his last game," Murphy said. "Our pain really went towards that. All the season had felt like borrowed time with Uecker, who died Thursday. Murphy knew it. If something is borrowed, it means it has to be given back. They just didn't want to acknowledge that until he had to. What Murphy, Yelich, and Arnold knew was that Bob Uecker was in a lot of pain. The 90-year-old legendary Brewers broadcaster had been in a private small cell lung cancer battle early in 2023. Few, even within the team, knew of what Uecker was dealing with behind the scenes, partly because he would still show up to the stadium in the same way that he had for 6 decades, with the same smile and the same howdy boys greeting and the same vigor to call a game. But what those three knew that game, a crushing final inning defeat and a winner-take-all playoff game with the New York Mets, was that not only likely the last time the voice of the Brewers would put on a headset, but it was also probably the final time they would see their friend at the ballpark. They'd all spoken with Uecker in the night in the wake of the loss, how the broadcaster, who was larger than life yet somehow connected to an entire city and state in a way that made everyone feel like they knew him, carried himself that evening. Murphy said, sums up the person who Uecker was. That epitomizes Ueck, Murphy said in a phone interview with the Journal-Sentinel. Kurt talked to him today. He thrived in that clubhouse. I say things like, he was a tremendous teammate. He thrived around people. He didn't treat anyone like, hey, you know what I've done in my life? He treated everyone as equal. The way that he remembered players that were brought to the big leagues, maybe they were only going to be there a couple of days. Maybe for a week filling in for someone else, he knew their names. He knew something about them. He had a special way of connecting with people and making guys feel important. They loved having guys, or the guys loved having him around. And this is a quote. Remember this quote from Murphy after that loss or recently after. When you think about the greatness of your job, the past 10 years seeing Bob Uecker, every home game was a highlight of the job. We would just sit there and talk. I would bring up as much as I could the impact he had on so many people, even people who had never met him, just the impact of his voice and the way they became so comfortable and interpreted the game through him. It's rare in our lifetime that we get to be around someone so special and so simple. He just wanted to do that, bring us the games, which I think is pretty cool. And I played you that clip from his Hall of Fame induction speech where he basically was like, look, I did movies, I did all these things. It was always baseball for me. I always wanted to come back to baseball. I would always look forward to opening day and finally getting to do that thing again. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Southside Scott.
Southside Scott. What's going on?
One, I haven't listened to the Brewers all that long, but, his name was always, out there. Everybody knew who he was.
Mm-hmm.
My memory that I have of him that always makes me laugh is when he was in Major League, the movie, and he goes, just a bit outside. I don't know. To me, that always stuck with me.
I think so many stories, and I can't remember if Costas said something along these lines earlier, but I think Tim Allen did too. Like so many people telling a Uecker story, or a funny saying or a funny line that he said is he was someone who always, in total confidence, Scott, knew the exact thing to say at that very moment. Right. Like this is the line that's going to cut the best and be the funniest. And be them, I walk through my life socially and at work, like, oh, how you doing? Oh, good. Not 6 feet under. Like there was never that with Uecker. It was always the perfect thing at the perfect time.
Now, I know I'm a Rockies fan. I lived in Colorado for a few years, but I grew up in California as a Dodger fan. So knowing the person that you listen to on the radio after year after year after year, I felt the hurt when Vince Scully died.
Yeah, I know that, and that was very similar to Dodgers fans. It's like my whole life, Dodgers baseball has been Vin Scully.
Yep. So I understand the hurt. So
it sucks. It's sad, but in the case of Vin Scully and Bob Uecker, long lives and a lot of time that fans got to spend with them, and they did it until the end. They didn't retire. Here is Mark Attanasio talking earlier today. This is from Mike Clemens just a couple minutes ago.
He beat pancreatic cancer, which nobody beats. But
which is, by the way, insane and something that no one talks about. Costas said that earlier today. He's like, can we just restate over and over the fact that he beat pancreatic cancer?
Another cancer now. I don't want to really, I'm not, he didn't want to talk about it. He was extremely private about it. I know, I can tell you, knowing the typical prognosis for that cancer, which I think he was suffering on for at least 2 years. There's just no way you live for 2 years with that, much less work full time. And if you heard his voice, in the stadium, we always to the end broadcast him, you would never know that it was anything. I think, part of that is he just got energized being at the ballpark, being around the guys. Part of that was his dedication to his craft. He always told me if he couldn't do the job anymore, he was gonna step back. He wasn't going to embarrass anybody, starting with himself. And he did the job right to the end, which is extraordinary. And really, really carefully, a very small group of people knew about that. And I kept trying to tell him to slow down, Kurt, given that was, take it a little easy. That's not you. He had, I'll just say, and I don't, whatever. There were days he would go have radiation treatment, then come to the ballpark and broadcast the game. It's unbelievable.
I mean, being 90 years old and working isn't easy. I never thought it's like, man, I never thought it was, and I'm struggling to put it into words exactly how I'm feeling, but the fact that not only was he doing this at 90, which is unbelievable, he was doing it while battling a terminal illness. Pretty inspirational, pretty powerful human right up till the end. We'll wrap up the Wisco Sports Show. Turn things over to Thorsten and Halperin, who are live. They're standing by at Monks and Sun Prairie, coming up in just a couple minutes.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Wisco Sports Show. Couple minutes left before Thorson and Heilbronn take over. Ebo and Zach standing by, awaiting 6 o'clock at Monk's in Sun Prairie. So stop by. Food and drink specials. You talk some Badgers basketball, Packers football. Brian Gutekunst speaking earlier today. And I would imagine that they're going to talk a little bit about Bob Uecker. I know Zach's not the world's biggest baseball fan. Both of them obviously growing up. Even if you're not a huge baseball fan, that's what's so funny. That's what's so interesting about Bob Uecker is he was as, I guess, culturally relevant as certainly as a baseball announcer could be, right? A radio announcer, not even a TV announcer, but a radio announcer. The news of his passing coming down, I think at like 9:45, 9:50 maybe, just before Ebo's show is wrapping up this morning, just before Bill's show is getting started. As I was getting ready today and preparing for the show, like it's a heavy topic. I'm trying to think, well, what do I say? How do I eulogize a personality and a presence that big? I was like, well, everyone's got a Uecker story. I rode an elevator with him once. Even if I had a good story, everyone's got a good story. I'm not going to have the best story. I grew up listening to him on the radio. Yeah, everyone grew up listening to him on the radio. Like, what's my thing? And this afternoon, as I'm getting ready for the show, I'm cutting all of these highlights. And it's January. I haven't really been thinking about baseball that much recently. And cutting all these highlights from all eras of Brewers baseball. I was watching those moments from Team Streak, Easter Sunday in '87, and Sabathia moments, and Ryan Braun moments. I'm realizing, baseball really is the best. Baseball can make you feel. Baseball at its best can make you feel a way that no other sport can make you feel, even at its best. Not to say that the NFL is better than Major League Baseball, or not to say that, not to say that Major League Baseball is better than the NFL. I think baseball at its best can make you feel a way that no other sport can make you feel. And in cutting all these highlights and getting that feeling today, I realized, I know why we love Bob Uecker. He's a great announcer, and he's funny, and he's been around forever, and he had a sitcom and the commercials, of course. But the reason we feel so strongly about Bob Uecker is because we feel so strongly about baseball. And he is Mr. Baseball. So Bob Uecker is just an extension of a sport that already makes us feel like nothing else can make us feel. Does that make sense? So that's my Bob Uecker take today. I rode an elevator with him this summer. Didn't say anything. He said something funny, made the elevator attendant laugh because he always was saying something funny. He was never not saying something funny. But I think my love of Bob Uecker is just an extension of my love, many people's love for baseball. And maybe if baseball isn't your thing, maybe that doesn't land with you. That's fine. Still funny as hell. Still been around a long time. Still means a great deal to a lot of people who aren't baseball diehards. We're watching hundreds of Brewer games, every summer. Thorson and Heilbronn coming up next. Live at Monk's in Sun Prairie. So if you're driving home around Madison, our WOZN audience, stop by and see them. Food, drink specials, right? I will be back tomorrow. Never miss a Friday show.